Appreciate you all being here and hope you're enjoying the event. I want to introduce our next panel. The panel is titled, Where's the Money? Raising from a New Regime in 2023. The panel is moderated by Allan, who has been a longtime supporter of LSI, this event, and this community. Allan is the co-founder and chairman of Life Science Angels, which is the largest medtech-focused angel group. They've invested over $70 million in more than 70 deals across biotech, medical device, diagnostics, and mobile health companies. And when Allan brought this idea to us for this panel, the conversation was really about, first of all, who are new investors in the community? Everybody knows a lot of the larger investors who we've seen make tremendous impact, but who are the new investors that we should be looking at? And frankly, who's doing deals right now in this market space that's been so complicated and challenging? And so really, really excited to hear from this group of angel investors, emerging fund managers, family office leaders, moderated by Allan. So Allan, again, thank you for everything you do for the community, and thank you for doing this panel. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Thanks all of you for coming. So he introduced the panel pretty well, and the idea is going to be, 10 years ago, whatever number of years ago, we sort of knew all the investors in our space, and today we don't. Every time I read Fierce Bio or Fierce Medical or any of the mags, there's 5 investors in there. Like, who are they? Where did they come from? What do they do? And the point is, you need to ask that, and you need to find them, because deals are being done in non-traditional ways. And so what we want to talk to you about are those non-traditional ways. So first, just like, where's the volume? Is enough stuff being done? Are these funds that do 1 deal a year? So LSA, we have 150 members. We'll do 6 to 10 new deals this year and maybe 15 portfolio updates. Let's go down the line and just kind of get it, just sort of size what's available to you here. So Jenny.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Allan and LSI. I'm Jenny Barba. I'm the founder of Features Capital. We are one of the newest medtech funds in the market. We invest in what we call the first-in-human stage with hardware, surgical tools, implants, very traditional med tech, which I love. And I live in Vermont, so anyone coming up to Vermont, you're more than welcome to stop on by.
And how many deals?
Started a year ago, and we already have 3 deals in the portfolio.
Okay.
Hey everyone, my name's Owen Willis. I'm the founder and general partner of Opal Ventures. Just a big thank you for everyone for having us here, and for all of you for joining us. Opal Ventures is a pre-seed health tech fund. We do about 60% of our investments on the healthcare infrastructure side, 40% focused around increasing access to care and devices. For us, we're really focused on increasing access to care. Like, that is the goal of the fund. And we're doing, our goal is to do another 6 to 7 deals this year. So we are very, very actively looking, and it's really kind of net new conversations for us that we're most interested in.
Martin?
First, I really want to thank Allan, who's an inspirational leader in the area of angel investing. I am Martin Gershon. I am the managing partner and the chief investment officer for Endeavor Venture Funds. We have 2 funds. The first fund had 69 investments and 55 exits, and was a traditional healthcare venture fund across biotech, medtech, and health tech. And we have launched a second fund in June of 2022, along with a venture studio. And I mention that because the number of deals is influenced by the model that we're using. In the venture studio, we take a very hands-on approach to investing in healthcare companies that are specifically looking at outcomes. And I am, by training, an oncologist, an immunologist, a former FDA attorney, and so trying to bring these things together to impact healthcare is extremely important to our core ethos. This fund has 4 investments, the second fund. We expect another 4 within the next couple of months, and we're targeting a total of 20 this year, and somewhere between 100 and 200 over the next 3 to 4 years.
Terrific, and Kevin.
Thanks, everyone, for coming, and thanks, Scott and the LSA team. I really appreciate being included, and of course, Allan, thank you as well. I'm Kevin Schimelfenig. I'm with the McGeenver family office. We're based in North Carolina. Must be something about North Carolina. If you say Raleigh, North Carolina, if anyone from North Carolina always finishes with North Carolina. Our focus is med tech, specifically med device and diagnostic. We do a little bit of real estate, but we actually made our money in that space, and we continue to do that. Part of our generational wealth is to collaborate with other family offices, so we've been doing that. We actually have a fund where we invest with other family offices that don't have experience in med tech, so we're in the process of helping them get educated. It actually is a great reciprocation for us. We're getting exposure to deals in real estate and other markets we don't have knowledge in, and we're able to go in and get really good deal terms. We are actively pursuing several deals now. We like to bring together our operations and our investments, so our family office is comprised of a real estate arm, a medical device commercialization arm, a direct investment arm, and a co-investment arm. All those arms are active depending on activity, so there's times where we're working on a deal with a major corporate partner where we're taking a product and perhaps licensing it and putting a commercial team behind it. Other times we're working with an early stage company where we might be doing a fee-for-first service relationship to help them figure things out and consulting. Then we'll move into where we may partially fund a commercial, what we call sales prototyping. And then a lot of times we'll end up where we'll bring in the capital to fund the commercial team and build it for them. Our whole purpose is to move them through the process and actually make them more competitive for acquisition. So that's kind of our world as we play in it.
Super. I'm going to try some slides real quick here. If this will work.
Okay, so just a really quick run through. I don't want to spend time on this because the panel is much more interesting. But you guys all know that public markets have dried up. Liquidity has dried up. What does that mean? That means that the LPs and the venture funds don't want capital calls. What does that mean? That means the venture funds don't invest as much, and particularly don't invest as much in new companies, and they start to conserve their capital and save it for their portfolio companies because they know their syndicates are going to break now going forward, and they're going to have to pick up rounds that other investors have contributed to. So when that happens, in these down cycles, the only message that we want you to take home here is whatever you were saying last year to investors, whatever your 2022 pitch was, whatever your KPIs were, your KPI now is be there in 2024, period. That's it, right? If you don't hit that one, your other KPIs are not going to be important. And so whether it's early 2024 or late 2024, nobody knows, but you need a plan for how to do that. So kind of that's what our focus is going to be about. The time to raise rounds is lengthening. The time between rounds is lengthening. The amount of money is less. So there is good news. There is good news. The brunt of this is going to fall on later stage companies with higher valuations, right? They're going to pare back now as they use their portfolio money more carefully. So the good news is there's much more interest in early rounds and more players coming in the early rounds. So a terrific tailwind there. In fact, seed stage last year, even the chart got missed off here, but the chart is awful for investment for the last 4 quarters. You'll see a real collapse in second half of 22 and continuing in first quarter of 23. But seed was up in healthcare in 2024. Okay, but valuations are decreasing. The shift is turning towards terms in favor of the investors. Rounds are much harder to get, and in particular, there are a number of preferential terms that are coming in that are difficult for founders, and you guys really need to be careful navigating those. We'll talk a little bit about that. So, and just to add a cherry on top, Silicon Valley Bank goes down. People forget that Silicon Valley Bank not only kind of controlled venture debt in our industry, so there goes venture debt drying up, which was an alternative to going into the market and raising equity. We don't have that now. They also had $9.5 billion in venture capital that was in funds, venture funds. They're not going to make those capital calls now. Those venture funds aren't going to have that money. So it's a negative picture. Nevertheless, This will be a terrific year. This will probably be one of the banner years in healthcare investing for all the people on this stage and everyone in this audience. The only question is your strategy, how you get there, how you're going to handle 2023 and 2024. So moving on from there, let's maybe start with Martin. Martin, so I just said what I said about terms and valuations. How are you thinking about this as you're meeting new young entrepreneurs and as you're talking to them? Where are you going to start with from a valuation and terms perspective in your mindset?
Well, thank you, Allan. I think that it's important to begin with the ethos that Endeavor has as its core. We want to work with CEO, founder, entrepreneurs who understand the importance of collaboration, leadership, and partnership. And what this means is an understanding of all the pieces that go into the corporation, including valuation. Now, we look at things organically and as a part of a mosaic. That means for us that valuation is just one piece. Typically, we're coming in Endeavor Fund 2 in the seed stage. And as I said earlier, we are really moving in to those investments as a venture studio model, which means that we typically take a large percentage of equity as a way of incorporating our working model into the core of the company, and then we mature that company and follow on with a syndicated investment deal. So in terms of the valuation of the company really moves away from what many CEOs come to us with, which is comparables. There are no comparables now. What we're looking at now is not what CEOs want us to look at, which is what happened in 2022 and 21 and 20. Those terms and those valuations are not applicable. What is important is the leverage that these CEOs and companies can get from partnerships and collaborations with large tech, large pharma, large biotech, large med tech companies. And so we look at the valuation question holistically.
So let's pick up on that. So Willis, how do you think about valuation?
Yeah, so I'm investing a little bit earlier than Martin. We're at pre-seed. And I think a big part of when I speak to founders is making sure that they are separating valuation from ego, right? Because I do think that when you're building a company, when it's your thing, when it's early on, it is a marker of success to raise a certain amount of money at a certain price versus it being a tool that you can then use to actually execute on the business that you want to build. And one thing that we think a lot about when we're talking to founders is, as they're raising their pre-seed round, making sure that they're raising at a valuation that they can then fill down the road and then raise at a higher valuation for their seed round, right? Because for us and for the founders, it's making sure that you're able to tell that narrative and that story, even in a market such as this, where things are just more difficult for everyone.
So let's just emphasize that. The point is, everybody at every round has to make money, right? We're looking for entrepreneurs who have that mindset. This is going to be a long slog. There are going to be multiple raises. You're going to have multiple partners and stakeholders. Everybody needs a win here. You need to work on that and be able to articulate that. Jenna, in companies coming to you, what's the best way to get your attention? How do you take companies seriously coming in?
Oh gosh, well I love skiing. So, heli ski trips, big boondoggles. No, probably not. Not these days. All jokes aside, it takes us quite some time to really get to know companies. For example, one company that we invested in, we knew for 2 years before making the investment. Another company, 9 months. Our fastest was, I think, April to December. Our next deal that we have lined up, I met in July 2021. A couple of our deals, just to give success stories, were actually introductions from angels that invested early on, and we know, we trust, and we share deal flow together through networks. We are unique. We're not, we haven't been around 20 years. We have to get to know the innovation centers and the incubators and go to pitch competitions and run pitch competitions and, just, I guess, be a little scrappy. We know what it's like to be in your shoes. Starting a venture fund is, they say, 6 times harder than raising money for your startup. So just to give you a sense of what it's like, we know what it feels like. And in that sense, my partner has been an operator. We're always thinking about, obviously the clinical outcomes, but who are our customers? What are our customers' needs? We spend a lot of time with the surgeons and physicians and understanding how this workflow fits into their daily procedures, how it creates efficiencies, the outcomes for the patient, and primarily reducing costs. I'm on the board of a hospital. That is the number one thing right now, in addition to staffing. And, thinking about in terms of your mission, your values, why do you wake up every day to do this? Did you quit your day job to start your startup? These are the little things along the way that we look for in building relationships with founders and getting to know you. So
terrific. Kevin, you get a ton of plans across your deck every day. How do you handle that? What do you do with a stack of stuff on your deck? How do you get to what you take seriously?
So just giving a magnitude, we get about 50 to 60 deals a week inbound, unsolicited. I happen to be very fortunate to work with a bunch of people that are really good at filtering them, but we actually are very deliberate, so we'll be looking for something based on our relationship. So as I said earlier, we kind of go up and down the ecosystem. We might be working with the corporate partner, and they have a gap in a portfolio that we see that perhaps they don't realize, and we think we can nurture an early stage company. We'll get involved with that. We also filter through, we have 3 fundamentals. Is it a deal that we can grow and help bring value to? So this is something we personally in our group have skill sets that actually are complementary and can help a startup get there faster. The second is the deal has to work. And mathematically, when you have that many deals coming through, it's like the stock market. We have a lot of companies we watch. When they're down, they're on sale. And you try to make sure you know about the company before it goes on sale. So making sure we get a good deal, but we also believe that the founders and those people, they need to be taken care of and not taken advantage of. If you haven't covered a payroll out of your own pocket and explained to your spouse why you're doing that and draining your own savings, you're not an entrepreneur. And then the third one is we kind of have a no-jerk rule. And the reality is it works really hard. This is a tough job. This is brutal, and Jenny's comment, that was really insightful as well. On the other side, raising capital is just as bad as it is doing a startup. But working with people that actually solution-oriented focused and dealing with stuff, we deal with difficult things every day. If it was easy, you wouldn't need anybody's investment. You wouldn't do it. So making sure you're partnered with people that are willing to work really hard and really invest in it and be able to go and what we refer to as violent agreement and then go get a beer or go to dinner with someone is really important for us.
Well, and these are long-term relationships, right? You're building this relationship over time, and I do think that a big part of the de-risking for a fund or for a family office is making sure that these are people you want to be meeting up with for many, many years. And I think that's a piece of it that I think people miss when they are going out and raising. Obviously, there's venture math. The math has to work, but you also want to make sure that you're working with people that are going to be aligned in both what you believe in and how you think things should operate within a business.
And really being that first call. I'm on a texting basis with all my founders, and it's so fascinating. I spoke to 2 people yesterday, and they said, I never hear from my VCs. I thought, oh my gosh. You're like, and I know them, they're amazing people. Why wouldn't their VCs want to just say, how's it going? What are you up to? Can I help? Oh, you're working on this? Let me introduce you to Allan. He's got this and this going on. And, that's our job. And we are the stewards of the capital. And our job is to help. And maybe that's an early stage venture thing. And the curiosity in each of us. But, that's what we do every day.
So one of the more sobering kind of ways I think about this is similar to relationships, but worse. You can step out of a relationship. You can divorce your spouse. You cannot divorce your investor. In fact, it's the other way around. So this has to really work. It's going to be a long-term relationship. We understand that a lot of these things have existential crises, and we're all going to be tested in the hearth, and we're looking for people we can work with and make it through that hearth. So LSA, if you want to really get to the top of the pile, there's always a pile. So getting in isn't your problem. Getting to the top of the pile is your problem. The way to do that is come in through a trusted partner. Figure out who these people are. They've all got websites. They've all got LinkedIns. They're all tied to somebody. Find somebody who's tied to us. Work with them, gain their trust, and get them to recommend we talk to you. That works really well in terms of that. Maybe it shortens that 9-month thing and gets down to people getting more comfortable with one another. Martin, how do you handle that? What's your real strategy for finding people who'll go the long term with you?
Yeah, it's such a critical question. So we really look at the system right now as at least a 5-year commitment. And in that 5 years, we look at ourselves as co-owners of the company. And so everything that the CEO and the entrepreneur founders are doing, we want to be aligned. What does that mean for us? It means that we need to work with people who are resilient, who listen to others, who know how to build teams, who appreciate the quality that comes with diversity, equity, inclusion, that comes with an understanding that you need people to help you build great companies in this particular environment, and that there is actually a tremendous pleasure in that process. So the notion that you have an incredible innovation or technology that stands on its own in a siloed way is not in keeping with what Endeavor stands for. We want innovation and technology to sit alongside the human aspect of the CEO who runs the company, and that has to be very mission-driven, benefiting the patient and improving outcomes. So we make very kind of structured decisions about who we're going to work with based upon the connection in terms of the value sets and the ethos that Endeavor and the CEO share.
Willis, what are you looking for? What'll bring them right into your sweet spot, and what'll tell them, this is somebody I can't work with?
Yeah, so our fund structure is a little bit different in terms of how we think about sourcing deals, doing diligence, and then supporting founders after the fact. So the fund is built on top of a community of founders and operators that have raised more than $250 million in early stage funding, and are really the main entry point for us when we're talking to founders. What's been really fantastic about that model is I get to meet founders right at the moment of inception for their company. I get to be part of those conversations really, really early. In some cases, actually the first investment out of the fund, I introduced the co-founders and got to see them start building that company. And so, really there's no shortcut for relationships. That takes time. You get to see kind of how the founder operates. But otherwise, outside of kind of the relationship side of things, we get a lot of inbound interest as well. And the things that I get really, really excited about, especially in this market, are companies that understand, both the opportunity that obviously they're trying to solve, but the incentives that drive the decision making that are going to allow them to get to market quicker, right? And so for me, a lot of my work is in the health tech space. So getting to market and speed to market is an incredibly important thing. But in terms of the founders, they have to have an earned insight into the space that they're going into, and they have to have those relationships that are going to allow them to get that first, second, or third sale. I think those are critical.
I want to go back to valuation for a minute. Why? Because I like to stir shit. I can tell you that the number one reason LSA will walk away from a deal is a dispute with founding team over valuation, or in particular, the way they handle the discussion about valuation. So, Jenna, I think I'm worth 12 million. I'm doing a convertible note. I've already got 2 million raised. I'm raising 2 million more. You in?
Oh dear.
How do you handle the
Yeah.
valuation discussion with your entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, I guess the benefit working with us is we're a 2-person investment committee. My prior firm was a 7-person investment committee. So understanding your audience is probably their first question for founders of who are the decision makers at the fund, what's their process, the modeling that they need to do, make sure you have your model in place, comps, things like that. If someone were to say, well, okay, one of the companies I had diligence for a long time, that was the exact conversation. There's 2 million left in the deal. And I said, yes.
Did you take it?
Of course. Like, that company is going to rock it, like knock it out of the park. And so, heck yeah, right? But there's many people, like, it's not a sale. It's not a pressure. It's not a transaction. Like Owen was saying, like, this is a relationship. That FOMO, fear of that is a tech phenomena. I think in med tech, we have a bit more structure to our diligence. And just because there's a big name that's already on the cap table doesn't mean I have to be in that deal.
No, but this is, Martin, you're here, right?
Yeah.
You're right here. So I just came out of Y Combinator, and I'm worth 26. I got a safe, and I got 3 guys in Y Combinator gave me 26. Come on, are you in?
Well, first of all, we don't do safes. So that's an immediate
Why?
door closer.
Tell us why.
In my former life, I was an attorney, and safes don't really supply the terms that make me comfortable sleeping at night. That's rule number 1. So I think what I would like to address here is the kind of the subjective aspect of valuation. So for us,
Especially for digital.
exactly. So we are 2/3 digitally health focused. That means that we're looking at electronic healthcare records, wearable sensors, big data analysis, drug discovery improvements, all the tributaries that come off the digital health space, of which there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands. The other third really is about opportunistic investments in biotech, bioag, and other areas of sustainability. We look at the market valuation in a very specific way. We want to be able to understand liquidity. We're not so much concerned about recession, we're concerned about liquidity. And from our analysis, we're in a long-term liquidity crisis. That means for us, from our research, that the S&P probably is going to return somewhere around 3.1% year on year for the next 10 years. And healthcare, we believe, is going to return in some sectors 37%. We look at this as an important part of evaluating companies and their valuations because we look at the money that has been put in by the large big tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Amazon as an indicator of what companies are willing to pay. And this, for us, is an important barometer. We know that there's been about $100 billion put into play by these big tech companies in very specific health tech-centric companies because the core competencies of these big tech companies allows synergies. We also know that as these companies move in Series B, they have very clear exit strategies. So for us, valuation depends upon understanding who the buyers are, where the liquidity is, what the entry and exit points are. And that's why we try to work with CEOs who are flexible, who do understand that they need to listen, as Owen was saying earlier, who is the counterparty? What do they want? What do they need? So it's a combination of understanding outcomes and patient-centric company development, but it's also a critically important piece to understand what your investors are looking for And they bring synergies to that you need to really pay attention to.
So Kevin, how much money should an investor, should a startup raise now? We just described the environment we're in, uncertain 2023, unclear 2024, lots of headwinds out there. What's the right amount of money for the investor to be asking for?
So for the investor, or for the CEO, right? Okay. Yeah.
The startup to be
All you can, and lock it down as fast as you can would be my advice right now, because you've got an interesting market. When you're looking at the capital, depends where you are. So if you're early stage, mid stage, or late stage, knowing what people are putting into them. For us, when we look at a deal, the amount of capital we're putting in is a direct correlation of available capital. So we're kind of an anomaly. Like when you're a family office, we have every dollar we have is at work. We actually move from a liquidity event to another. So there's times where we have lots of capital to deploy. Other times we don't. So we'll pass on deals and we'll explain to a CEO the timing's bad. And there's a lot of deals I feel like the fifth Beatle on, but that's okay. We're comfortable with that. But we'll look at the deals and try to figure out the right amount of money. So for us, it's usually how much money we have available at a time. And then if the valuation back, which was well covered, we'll look at that. So we kind of use the analogy, we've never done a bad deal. We've only done bad due diligence. But when we look at them, we'll say, okay, what's the multiple we can get back on this money? And we compare it to where else we can put the money. And now, for example, even with interest rates and things going up, you can earn a certain amount of money sitting in the bank. Or in the past, you couldn't. So as we look at it, we'll probably, a good number for a company to be raising is in the $5 to $15 million that we think is a good sweet spot for an early stage company, depending on valuation.
So Willis, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would.
Owen, I'm sorry.
So I think there's kind of two pieces. So number one, as an investor, one of the things you do have to think about are the investors that are going to be following on in the future, right? And I think, investment decisions aren't necessarily made in a vacuum. You have to believe, if I'm at pre-seed, I have to believe that at seed stage, if the company hits their metrics, there is a vision, a story, a market opportunity that will get seed stage investors excited, right? And it's just going to look different at seed versus pre-seed. And so, when I'm thinking about it from kind of the company valuation standpoint and in other places, I do think that that has to be kind of part of the story that the founders has to think about through that journey. And I do think, when I think about kind of my fund and the structure, many and most of the immediate screening decisions come from a company raising outside of my model, right? And if they are raising either too much capital, they're raising at too high of a valuation, that's going to be outside of my mandate. And it's a conversation that I'll have with the founder. And if there is a way to get in at a lower price because of the value that I bring, that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, I think there's an amount of diligence and inflexibility that I think you sometimes have to have in your investing.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I could just add to that. So it's interesting when you're raising capital, for us is making sure the CEO understands that when the business sells, what is the number? So we'll talk to a CEO, and you got to be inspired by someone who's willing to do what they do. So it's always interesting and very, leave the conversation invigorated, but who are you going to sell to, and how much is it going to sell to, and what is the buyer? So one thing I've uncovered over the years is there's a threshold for corporate buyers. And if it's over a certain threshold, it's a little bit more complicated for them to buy your business. If it's below a threshold, it can be done pretty seamlessly. The other issue is the more capital you bring on, the higher the multiple has to be to exit. So for example, I have friends in the traditional venture capitals, they have a 10 to 1. For every dollar they put in, they want 10 out. So if they give you $10 million, you can't sell for less than $100 million. You may have just eliminated yourself from a quick transaction. So knowing that, because some of the best deals I did, we didn't put as much money in, but we turned the capital quickly, and we had a pretty good multiple, and the transactions moved through pretty quickly. So we kind of look at that as well as we're doing it, but it is a very interesting dynamic. You have people you'll talk to, who's the buyer, XYZ big company, who do you know? I'm going to call the 800 number. That's a problem. They need to know who these buyers are and what their characteristics are for buying and what fits. And yesterday, I think it was on one of the panels, Christos from Zimmer was spot on with the comment of, don't call them up with the cardiology product. That's not what they do. So make sure you match the characteristics of what you're doing to the partner. And as an investor, if you can't explain to me my line of sight to return my money, because for me, it's like inventory. I want the capital back to do another deal. And so I'll look at it differently.
So Jenna, I've been in this 25 years, and I can't actually recall an overcapitalized medtech company. So, all right, it's tough now. We're in a down market. Terms might not be so good. Valuation might not be so good. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? What amount of money is going to make you comfortable to write a check?
So in terms of, this is where MedTech is so unique. We always raise to the next milestone. We were just talking earlier that the next milestone is actually 6 months longer than you think it really is. And we've all been through cycles and, 01 and 09 and et cetera. And in terms of that check, it could be tranched. It could be, a certain number of patients. It could be, key things in development. So this is where having a CFO and helping you with that model and the numbers that you need in the capital raise is important. But really, again, thinking about the capital it's going to take total. So we also do the who's going to buy you for how much, when, and then we say, and how much do you need to get there? And we also do the math backwards of our percentage ownership at a seed, an A, or a B, and what we need in those percentage ownership numbers.
Let's emphasize this again, and I'll tell you why. As somebody said, attaching ego to value. It's such a personal thing. You buy your car, your house, your business. These are the most important things in the world to you. And so they're very, very hard to be objective about. As a matter of fact, though, this is a math discussion. That's what investors are going to do. They're going to look at
fiduciary duty,
right?
Yeah.
They're going to run the numbers. What can you exit at? How much capital is it going to take to get there? What stages are there that can raise your value for inflection points for investors during those? And the numbers kind of fall into place on that. And if founders don't want to have that discussion, that's a pretty negative signal for investors. How have you experienced that?
Well, I guess it goes back to it's a partnership, it's a relationship. It's probably longer than a lot of marriages. It's are you willing to roll up your sleeves and be a part of it together?
California, I don't know about Vermont. But Martin?
It's just such a fascinating discussion here. We look at things a little bit differently at Endeavor because we are in a new sector with AI driving a lot of our focus and machine learning. And for us, what that means is that we look at expanding use cases. We look at ways to generate new revenue streams. We're all about commercialization and generating revenue at every single step. We will do that early on with feasibility studies with large corporations and strategics. We will do that across industries. We work with one company, for example, that is a wearable sensor company that initially was designed to notify healthcare providers about potential fall risk for patients that are in long-term care facilities. We immediately came in and said, this is really not going to hit our bogey at a €35 per month subscription service. We added a cardiac, respiratory, pulse ox series of sensors. We looked at sleep as a way to measure many aspects of what pharmaceutical companies are interested in. And we sold that data to pharmaceutical companies and increased the revenue streams within a few short months. We then took that same sensor and we moved it over to the US because this is a European-based company. And we went to pre-diabetics and we put the sensors on these pre-diabetics to look at their compliance with important aspects of nutrition and sleep and exercise. And we sold that data. We then moved out of healthcare and into the workman's compensation space. And we went to employers who have employees who are in dangerous work environments. And we said we can put sensors all across your corporation to monitor how at risk your employee is. So what we try to do, and I think this circles back to the valuation issue, is we try to look at revenue generating potential new use cases, and most importantly, how buyers and investors are going to respond to that and pick that up and drive an accelerated growth curve for these companies, which could include licensing deals, or it could include many other kind of financial structures. Ultimately, we think that amplifies the value of the company.
Well, and going back to the question about how much should you raise, right? I think that's it's an important one. A big part of early stage investing is obviously the fund math. It is also evaluating and underwriting risk. And one of the biggest risks that the biggest risk that a company has is running out of money. And one of the reasons why, to echo Martin's point and kind of drill in a little further on it, a big part of the reason why early commercialization for us is so important is that because capital is not cheap right now, because it's harder to raise extensions, because it's harder to raise seed rounds, there's less margin for error, right? You have less time to build out the go-to-market. You have less time to think about, is this path going to work versus another one? And so for us, those early indications of product market fit go a tremendously long way towards de-risking. And to answer your question on how much should you raise, I think you need to raise, if we're thinking about kind of from today forward, at least enough to get to the second half or towards the end of 2024.
So I'll end it. I'll end it here. I'll just make a comment. So look, I've been a founder way more than I've been an investor, and I get it. Look, when it's your equity, and you're giving it away, this is a tough discussion, right? I founded companies where the first round we gave up 75%. And why did we give up 75% of our equity? Because we got an investor syndicate that we knew would power us to exit. And they powered us to exit on succeedingly up round prices. And the founders in that company made $50 million out of the exit. And it wasn't that high. It was only $250 million exit. So to me, the deal is this. Don't worry about, right now, go get the money. Don't worry about terms. I mean, okay, you have to worry about terms, but don't worry that much about valuation. Pick your investor, pick your partner. We don't want an unhappy, pissed off founder. That's not going to be a team who works hard and is incented. We want it to be right for you. We want it to be right for us. Get that relationship going. Get the money, get in there, and move forward. That would be how I would leave you.
And I think just going back to the title of this panel of the new regime, depending on what state you are in, there is a whole pool of capital coming from U.S. Treasury called SSBCI. For example, we're getting capital from the state of Vermont to invest in Vermont companies. Each state is getting a pool of this capital. So figure out who's allocating. There are a ton of new funds starting. Family offices have been tremendous in the ecosystem, corporates, grants, NIH. I love meeting companies. I think there might be someone in the room who had about $4 million was in the middle of their clinical trial, and they had not taken a dime of venture funding. So there are scrappy ways out there.
Yeah, and I think to go back to the beginning of the conversation, the number one job of a CEO as you're building is obviously to keep your company capitalized. And there are going to be many market opportunities in the future, probably for kind of where you are thinking and what you are building. And you just need to survive to be able to take advantage of those. And so I would really encourage CEOs, as you're thinking about raising capital, to be flexible, to be creative, and find the partners that you want to work with. And when it comes to terms and things like that, this is a long game, right? That's what you're building towards. And find investors that are excited and willing to work with you, and the other pieces will fall into place.
I was going to add, if I could, think about it from a capital efficiency perspective. Make sure the capital you have is going into things that actually have an ROI on them. It's a really good way to look at it, and think of yourself as a wartime concierge. It's going to be a hard time right now, but it's always been hard.
Particularly now, and Martin brought up the point of this is a time when CEO leadership really matters. Here's the deal. Of all the things you could spend money on, If you can't articulate a clear case for why that expenditure increases your value for the next investor, don't do it. Drop that one. Just spend money on things that matter to the next people you're going to ask for money. With that, we're way over. I appreciate everybody
Go have a
sitting through
cocktail.
this right before the bar hour, so thank you all for that. We'll see you outside.